Hi, how are you doing? I'm back again with another video on Azure. Today, I'll be talking about how you can manage your application with deployment slots. Now, what are deployment slots, you might want to ask me? Deployment slots are instances of your application, or let's call it environments of your application, running on the same server. Now, how best can I explain this? You have a pretty nice application that is running in the cloud. This is your application. Now, this server is what your general users come to visit every time, your 1 million users. But you actually want to do a release of a version of that application, let's say in 2 weeks' time. Your developers have finished testing everything and it works. So all you need to do is that on that particular day, you want to push this over to that environment without actually having to do much of the DevOps side of clicking through and all that. So what do? Or the process of pushing out code in your organization is you having to write code first, push to a dev environment to QA, but still running on the same kind of server. Of course, that is not the best kind of scenario to be in, but let's assume that that's what it is. So what you need to do is swap over this version over here. Or, for some very nice reasons, you want your users to have different feel of the same application in a random way. So you create version A and version B. You see here? A/B testing. Version A, version B. And you decide that, okay, 50% of my traffic should go over here, and 50% of that other traffic should go over here. That is another use case of deployment slot. So schedule deployments or A/B testing. Now let's actually show how that works in Azure without me having to bore you so much with my ugly drawings. Now I'm in the cloud. Now to be able to do this in Azure, you need to be on at least the S1 plan to be able to manage your application with deployment slots. So let's get into it. I'll go over to deployment slots over here in Azure, and what I need to do is create that slot. So for me, in this case, I will use 2 environments, dev and production. Of course, based on your use case, your environments might be more. So what I do, once that page loads up, is to add a slot to my application. And what happens in that case is that I give that slot a name, and then I can decide to clone settings or not. So in this case, I'll just give it the name dev. And I can say, okay, clone my settings, or do not clone any settings. In this case, I don't want to clone any settings, so I'll allow that slot. It takes a couple of seconds to actually provision that slot for me. So what it's doing in essence is creating a new web application, installing all the needed runtimes on it, and all that nice little background process that happens at the back end that I don't know much about. But I know it works and I'm happy about it. So that slot is done creating. Let's actually look at what it looks like, shall we? Let's click into it. You can see that traffic over there. I can manage the percentages of how I want my traffic to be routed in between the different instances. Okay, so that is loading up and I click on the URL of the application. So in essence, the name of the environment will be appended to the app service. So you can see right over here on top, I see -dev, and in my main application is just the bland application without anything. No dev, no staging, nothing attached to it. So this loads a blank template for my application. Now let's wait for that to load up. Now while that actually loads up, let me go ahead and set an environment variable for this, so that in Azure comes as an app setting. So what I need to go ahead and do is go over to my configuration area. So I have something called custom machine name. Okay, and that is what shows the difference between my dev environment, my local machine, and my production environment. So I'm going to add that configuration right over here now. Okay. Add new application settings. And then it's called custom machine name. And I'll call that devbox. See this value here? Devbox. Oh, one thing I forgot to do, I need to make that a deployment slot specific setting so that when I'm swapping slots, that setting is not copied over to the other environment. So I need to check this box for that. I did that also for my production environment. So that is devbox right there. I saved that. And watch what happens when I now decide to swap my slot. So I want this, let's say for example, I made a very wrong deployment. Okay, let's say this is what is on dev right now, even though it's not. Okay, I go over here to Azure. I go back into my web application, the main one, not the slot one. And I decide to swap the slots. So that gives me a little blade that asks me what exactly I want to do. So I can perform the swap with a preview, or I can decide not to. So with a preview means it shows me what settings are changing. You can see here my current value. So this values will be swapped from production to development, or from A to B slots, whatever name you called it. So you can see any target changes, you see all that. If anything is changing whatsoever, you will see all that right here. So I'll uncheck this box now and just click on swap. So what happens right now is that my production now becomes my development becomes my production instance. It takes a couple of moments depending on the kind of copy operation that is going on, and it should be done any moment from now. Okay, now swap is done. Let's check out what it looks like now. So this is my dev that is now the version of my production environment. I refresh that, I see dev box. This was production box before. I refresh that and I see that version of what was in dev. Now I'm going to make a quick deployment now from GitHub Actions. I'm doing that on my other computer over here. So I'm just going to click that, commit a new file to my repo, and then a build goes on. So that takes a couple of moments. The build is actually going on right now. While we actually wait for that, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please give it a thumbs up. New on my channel, subscribe. Returning user, thanks for coming back. I will create more videos like this just for you. So the build is going on now. So this saves stress in a very good way, because let's say for someone like me, I think it comes in a way where I run a very small team of developers where the apps we deploy are pretty small. They don't break a lot of stuff, so I don't need to do all the gigantic containerization stuff. So I just push a version that wants to go live next week. So I tell users, oh, your version will be deployed next week. Okay, fine. My developers are finished writing my code, and then it's actually ready to deploy. All the settings will just be swapped over. All the code and nice stuff will be swapped over alongside it. Now, deployment is done from GitHub Actions. I refresh this, and I see production environment, development environment, all code remains the same. That is deployment slots in Azure for you. Let me know if you have questions about deployment slots in Azure and how you're using it for your next application. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you again in another video. Goodbye.